Good morning. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock and we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Lisa Hughes, the Deputy County Manager and Finance Officer in Yadkin County. And it's my pleasure this morning to introduce David Baker to our group. As a finance officer, David is a familiar face to me because he's been coming and talking about tag and tax together for several years. But it's something that has not been presented at a budget conference. David has worked with the Property Tax Division of the Department of Revenue since 1988. He lives in Mamers, North Carolina, is a graduate of NC State with a bachelor's in animal science and a master's in public administration. So not to take up too much more of his time, I'll turn it over to David Baker.
Thank you. Can y'all hear me all right? Everybody hear the mic like this? I appreciate the introduction, Lisa. If people ask me sometimes, how do you start off in animal science and end up in taxation? Well, you know, we all get to where we are taking different paths in life. So I just happened to have dated the tax administrator in Johnson County's daughter in high school. I graduated, I was in between jobs, saw him on the street one day. He said, we're doing a reappraisal here. Do you want to help out, pick up new construction, stuff like that? I said, sure, I got to pay my bills. And 28 years later, here I am. So, you know, I've had a good career, and I appreciate the opportunity today to come speak to this group. When I got the email saying, inviting me to come speak to the group, I'm kind of like, I didn't know that group existed. You know, because like I said, I'm always talking to the finance officers, association, the assessors, the collectors, and different ones. And this has been a topic that, you know, we've talked about for years now, probably longer than I like to, and I know more about DMV than I ever wanted to know. Tag and Tax is a new program. We've been trying to put this in place since 2005 when the law passed. Lots of reasons why it took all these years to put it in place. Some of them political, some of them appropriations, some of them computer problems, delaying the project, going a different direction from an IT perspective. We actually went live back in September, and overall it's going pretty well. I've been very pleased with it. I think most of the counties and the local governments have been. DMV overall has been pretty pleased with it as well. They never really wanted to be partners with the counties, but they are, so we're all in this together at this point. We'd like to introduce Tina Stone here from our office. Tina handles, she heads up our personal property section, and she used to be the Chatham County Tax Administrator. I got an opportunity to steal her away from Chatham County and did, and she's been very, very important to this project since she came on board. She came on board right as we get ready to finish it up and go live, so she walked into, might be more than she thought she was going to, but I do appreciate her efforts. What I'm going to try to do today is kind of give you an overview of where we were, where we are, and maybe where we're going. Look at some of the numbers as far as the revenues that are coming in, the expenses. I talked a little bit about some of the General Assembly's bills that have passed that affect the expenses particularly. And then at the end, there's a section here on reports. And if we get enough time, we'll talk about some of the reports out there. That's one reason I brought Tina along. She thought I just wanted her company, but I told her after I got here that if they had any questions on reports that I couldn't answer, I would defer to her because she works very closely with the counties on those reports. I try to stay out of the vehicle tax system altogether as far as the computer part of it, and for the most part I can. So what was the problem that we were trying to solve by going to tag and tax? You know, prior to 1993, all the taxpayers were supposed to list their vehicle with the county would bill it and then collect it. And the problem we tried to solve in 1993 was the listing of the vehicles. It's just make sure we got all the vehicles on the tax rolls. What we learned from doing that was that the collection rate started going down though, because people would wait until they needed their tag to pay their tax. Okay, so if I get a tax bill 4 months after I renew my tag, I'll wait another 8 months to pay it. I've got my sticker. I'll pay you late. That 5% interest didn't mean anything to me. So the collection percentage continued to slide down over the years. And this is what it was right before we, this was 2012 matter of fact stuff, numbers here from the Local Government Commission. You can see here that registered motor vehicle, the collection percentage is about 10 points lower than it is for everything else. And that's substantial. Not only is it 10% lower, counties are spending all kinds of resources chasing people down with $25 tax bill on a motor vehicle. Garnishing wages, taxing bank accounts, levy on vehicles, and all that makes people real happy. Okay. So, you know, we figured there has to be a better way here. At that time, only about 66% of the vehicles out there, the bills were paid on time. Okay, so obviously there was a problem with the system that we had. The goals of the new system was basically to improve the citizens' experience. If all these people want to wait and buy their tag when they pay their tax when they buy their tag, then let's allow them to do so. But let's get our money up front instead of 12 months later. Most people to date I've talked to out there from a citizen's perspective like this because that's one less time they have to deal with government. You know, the average citizen out there, they don't care if it's you at the local level, me at the state level, or the feds, whoever. It's all government. You know, if you can send me one notice and I pay everything, I'm happy for the most part. The only ones that we're not happy this first year were those who had not paid their tax last year, ended up having to pay twice all at one time. Well, if they paid on time to start, we wouldn't spend all this money to do this. So it does reduce costs. There's been a lot of debate over the cost, whether or not the cost of local government is more or less. I've got some numbers here we'll go over. But if you look at it on the big picture, it saves citizens tax dollars. Because if we're sending out $3 million worth of notices from DMV, then the counties do the same thing 4 months later. That's, if you do it one time, it's got to save money. You know, so it may be different, a little bit different for each jurisdiction, but overall to citizens, this is a cost savings to them. That was one of the goals. Of course, we wanted to improve collections and revenues and improve compliance, and this definitely does that. In the new system, from a tax office perspective or a county's perspective, the county assessor pretty much does the same thing they've always done. They've got to determine where the vehicle's taxable in, what the value of the vehicle is, and get a tax bill ready to send. They did that for years, ever since 1993. No difference today. So all counties are using the same system. It's called the VTS, or the Vehicle Tax System. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But that system is used by all 100 counties. It's a web-based system. They log into it each month. DMV downloads or uploads the vehicle information for it. It's like, say, September renewal law comes in there one time. The county processes it, sends the information back to DMV. DMV prints the notices and mails it out. DMV collects it, sends back your money. That's pretty much how it works. The only thing different here is if you buy a new car, then the county doesn't see that ahead of time. Because if you buy a new car, you've got to pay your tax either up front, or you can get what's called a limited plate, which gives you 60 days to pay. And after that, your tag becomes invalid. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. This kind of shows from the big picture, you know, the process here. A lot more details than that in this system. It's a fairly complex system. It involves 3 state agencies, 100 counties, an outside vendor, all coming together in one computer system. So it was a challenge to do. I know the state auditor, and we'll talk a little bit about this at the end, the state auditor is doing an audit of the system. They have not completed that. The first time we met with them, they thought they were doing a simple DMV system audit. And after about 30 seconds of me explaining to them what the system did, they had to go back and sign different auditors and reduce, change the budget up. It was a fairly complex system to audit. The general rule is DOT Physical will distribute the money back to the county the 10th day of the month following collection. The counties then distribute that money back to municipalities and other tax jurisdictions within the county. DOT fiscal will provide gross collections, bill and credit card, debit card costs, net revenue. The cost of initial billings for this system were actually paid for out of the special account. So the first couple of months, you didn't see any, the counties didn't see any costs involved, because it's kind of like if you start a new system, if you start a business, you got to jump start it. And same thing with the system. There was no money to pay for the expenses until after you started collecting the tax. So we jump started it using the special account that we'll talk about here in just a minute as well. Overall, it's going pretty well, as I said. There were some minor defects. How many of y'all ever rolled out a computer program system new? How many have done that and never had a problem? Okay, it doesn't happen, right? You know, we took 100 counties and all their data, converted it into its one system, took DMV's data and incorporated that into it. There's going to be some issues, no question about that. Overall, they were minor, though. We've had some issues, we've dealt with them. One thing I've learned about DMV, about the time I think I've heard every situation that could ever take place with someone buying a tag or turning a tag in or getting 5 tags from the same vehicle in the same year, I hear a different one. And it's unreal what people do with their tags. They're trying to write a law that addresses all that and then program that law is difficult to do. But I think we about got it, although I will tell you something will come up next week or a month from now that I've never thought of after 28 years of doing this. For the most part, it's been accepted pretty well by the citizens and stakeholders. I've not heard a whole lot from taxpayers other than the ones I talked about a while ago. That they walk into the DMV to buy a tag. DMV says you can't buy a tag because you owe the county taxes from last year. So they go to the county, they pay the tax, and then they have to go back to DMV. DMV says, okay, we'll sell you a tag now, but you got to pay the tax for the next 12 months. Well, they're not real happy. But that's a 1-year problem. After that, it'll clear itself up, and we're getting close to the end of that 1 year. As far as the update on the project, we did go live in September. We phased out the implementation of it. The project was actually closed out in November. The final memorandum of understanding, which is between DOR, DMV, DOT, County Commission Association, and League Municipality, was signed off by everybody. So we all understand what we're doing and who's paying for what and all those type of things. The project had a steering committee. It was made up of the DMV commissioner, myself, the CIO of DOT, the head of DOT fiscal, the County Commission Association, League of Municipalities. Had one person, it was Pat Goddard from Johnson County, was on that as well. Pat's retired now. But the steering committee was basically made all the big decisions on this project. Something had to be decided that all the stakeholders couldn't agree on. We escalated to the steering committee. The steering committee made decisions about how to spend the money, what needed to be done, what didn't need to be done, those type of things. We shut the steering committee down at the end of the project. So we have established what's called the Change Control Board. The Change Control Board's makeup was pretty much the same as the steering committee was. The only difference is I'm the chair of the Change Control Board, and I don't vote unless there's a tie. As far as the 6 members go, all the stakeholders are represented. Tina represents DOR for DMV, has somebody on there. The counties has a person on there. Marcus from Wake County and Durham County also has someone on there for the League of Municipalities. We also have a group of what we call subject matter experts that meets with the Change Control Board, kind of feeds the information to the Change Control Board to make decisions. Anytime you've got this many players involved in the system, the main reason we have a Change Control Board is to make sure the DMV doesn't do something in their system which blows up the tax system and vice versa. And if those systems go down, nobody can buy a tag in North Carolina. So it's very important that the system stays up and running all the time. So we can't make a change on the vehicle tax system that causes a problem with STARS, which is the DMV system, and vice versa. So Change Control Board's in place to govern all that and to take up issues as they develop. We've also put together what we call a VTS users group. A lot of y'all have, systems out there that you have a user group for. You get together, you decide what needs to change in the computer, how the money's going to be spent, things like that. That's really what we're doing here. This is not a state system. It is housed at DOR. We have the servers in our building. We have 2 people assigned to make sure those servers stay running and handle all the problems with that in our IT department that are paid for by local governments through the transaction fee that we'll talk about in a minute. So it is a local system. Any enhancements made to the system is paid for by local government. So our goal was to make sure local governments decided what needed to be done, what changes needed to be made, what enhancements needed to be made, and then how the money was going to be spent. And that's basically what we do with the users group. Now there are some things that just have to be fixed. I mean, there are defects or things that we didn't think of that the vendor may say is an enhancement. We may call it a defect. We have to get together, discuss those things, and decide who's going to pay for it. Are they going to pay for it, or is it not within the scope of the original contract? Haven't had a lot of problems with that, but every now and then one pops up. The VTS vendor has a contract with DOT, or did have. That contract ended at the end of June. July 1st, the contract is now between DOR and Farragut, which is the software vendor who wrote the VTS, maintains the VTS. They've been great to work with. And so the contract now is between DOR and the vendor. So we kind of represent the needs of local governments as it is around this system. But we always rely on the users group. Right now we've got a wish list. You know how one county wants this and another county wants that, and this county thinks this would be good. We've got that list. Matter of fact, we went over earlier this week with the vendor. We'll take those to the users group. The user group has assessors, collectors, finance people on it to try to decide how to spend the enhancement money that's been set aside to do that. So how was the project paid for? The project was paid for by those people who would not pay their tax on time. Okay? So some of y'all may have helped pay for this system. If you ever paid the property tax bill on your vehicle late. And most of us have at one point or another, because the problem with that stuff is you get something from DMV, you buy a tax, 4 months later you get a tax bill, you throw it over there and you say, oh, I should have paid that. Now it's 2 days late. Well, you got charged 5% interest, which is still the case today. 3% of that interest went into a special account administered by the Treasurer's Office to pay for building this system. So Representative Farwell, who was the sponsor of the bill, House Bill 1779, you hear that sometimes, which put this in place, our conversation with him was he wanted to fund it through this process. When we said we were going to go from 2% interest to 5% interest on motor vehicles, I thought my phone would ring off the hook. Okay? I've never got the first call from anybody because they don't care. They'll pay that tax when they need the tag, and they'll pay 5% interest if that's what they've got to do that. And so this right here raised a tremendous amount of money. From June 6th, from January 2006 into June 30th, 2013, $41 million, right at $42 million, came from local governments into that account. On average, that's about $500,000 a month. That shows you people were paying late. They don't care. And so if they're going to pay late, just put it together. And they're still paying late. And you're still getting the 5% interest. Of course, now that 3% doesn't go to the state, it just stays home. Okay? So that's still in place. One reason why this number got so big was because this project was supposed to have been in place around 2009. Then it got postponed to 11. Then it got postponed to 13. So it's all that was coming on. We just let the money keep coming in. Okay. The project's budget was $26 million. We spent a little over $25 million, and just recently we've sent back almost $17 million back to local governments that was left over. Hopefully everybody's got their money now, because I don't have it. I got more phone calls over this than I did anything else. Is where's the leftover money? My treasurer's office has got it, and we're working through the process. It took us longer to get it out. We promised it would be out by the end of the fiscal year, and it was, but only by that much. It took longer than I thought it would with all the budget office and everything else. So this is kind of what happened to the money. There is no money now left. We sent it all back. I think we got maybe $20,000 or so that we're still going to spend on enhancements on the DOT contract. Okay, so we're going to try to spend that, because I don't want to have to try to figure out how to send $20 million back to 100 counties and 500 municipalities. Yes, you know, that's going to be kind of tough to give everybody their little share of that. We'll take it. I understand. Now, let's talk about operational costs. The day-to-day cost of this, doing this, is passed on to local governments. That was one of the agreements between the local governments and DMV and the state, was that the local governments would pay for the cost of the operation of this system. And I'll go over more in detail than that. But each county pays their share, each city pays their share, each fire district should pay their share, any special district should pay their share. Okay? So everybody should pay their share of the overall cost. And what we're going to talk about here is the transaction fee. How much does it cost to send one bill and collect that? And there's a charge for that. And that charge for that is split between anybody that has a stake in that particular bill. Senate Bill 305 passed last session. In the long session, it does affect the fees. The steering committee, the law said that the collection fee would be 1/3 of what the local plate agents and DMV got for selling a tag, which is $1.43. Had to be at least 1/3. The steering committee came to the conclusion that it should be 48 cents. That is 1/3 of $1.43, okay, which we thought was enough. Okay. The LPAs, which is the local plate agencies, thought otherwise. Okay. So they lobbied the General Assembly last session. They were able to get this bill introduced and it passed. So that 48 cents became 71 cents under this bill. They also got put in there for a limited plate, which is a T-sticker. Anytime that was issued by an LPA, they got $1.27 for that. So all of a sudden the cost of doing this thing went up on us. Okay, out of our control, out of your control, from the standpoint that they were able to lobby better than the people that represent local government. Now, for the first 6 months of the system, the LPA's got $1.06 instead of 71. Then we're supposed to revert back to 71. Okay. So that's kind of where we were before this session of the General Assembly. Now, the T-sticker, let me explain that real quick, and we'll keep talking about this limited restoration plate. If I buy a new car, typically I either do one of two things. I either transfer my tag off my old car, right? Or I get a new tag. A lot of times if you leave the car dealership, you have what's called a 30-day cardboard tag. You know, it's on the back of your car, and somebody will send you a plate at some point. You know, the car dealer will mail you a plate, they'll tell you to come back in, they'll wash your car for you, vacuum it out, put the plate on there for you, you know, that kind of thing. That's just part of their, you know, marketing and salesmanship. Okay. And that's still the case. Okay. The difference is that if you don't pay your tax up front, when you get your plate, it doesn't have a year sticker on it. It has a T sticker on it. Any of y'all seen a T sticker? Okay. If not, y'all will be riding around looking for T stickers now, because I do it all the time. Okay. If you buy a vehicle and don't pay your tax up front, you get a T sticker on your plate. You got 60 days to pay it. You'll get a notice from DMV that says here's what you owe. You'll have 60 days to pay it. At that point, your tag becomes invalid. So if law enforcement rides around and sees a T sticker and look over here and it's been 90 days, you're subject to get a ticket for an expired tag. If you pay your bill within 60 days, you'll get a year sticker to put on top of the T sticker. So there are some additional costs in that. When we first put the law in place, that was not in there. That's not something that most of us would care to have in the law. But car dealers associations are very powerful. and they lobbied very hard that they did not want to collect property tax. This was their way, this was a compromise, a way around them having to collect the property tax. So if you hear the term T-sticker or limited plate, you'll have to understand what that is, and just know that it's a way for car dealers not to have to collect taxes. Now, my personal opinion is at some point, a lot of car dealers will start collecting property taxes. But a lot of citizens are going to say, why can't you just throw that in with the sales tax and everything else and finance it all? You know, but we'll see what happens with that. Most of them right now will not collect the property tax. Next time I buy a new car, I'm going to find a car dealer that will take my tax and will buy my car for me. I don't know if I plan on it actually. So we've got the 71 cents, $1.06 for the first 6 months, $1.27 is in place. The good news on the T-sticker is a large percentage of the issuances, which is a new vehicle, are not done by local plate agents. They're done by car dealers who have an online system with DMV. They don't get the $1.27. So that's not quite as bad as it appears. House Bill 1050 just passed recently, probably 3 weeks ago. Passed the General Assembly and signed by the governor as law. The Senate Bill 305 said this had to be studied. Okay, and the County Community Association and the League kind of pushed for it to be studied because they were hoping to come back in and being able to convince the General Assembly to reduce that 71 down to 48. What happened was it was studied by a subcommittee of revenue laws, and they decided to take the fee from 71 back to $1.06. So the study didn't work out the way local governments wanted it to. So going forward, the fee is $1.06, not 71 cents. So they fought that battle twice, they lost twice. Okay. DMV only gets 71 cents. There's a difference between a local plate agency and DMV. DMV only has an office in Raleigh, a couple offices in Raleigh and one in Charlotte that are run by state employees and are DMV operated. Everything else is a contract agent of DMV. So when I say LPA, that's a contract agent. Anytime they collect a property tax for you, they get $1.06. Anytime DMV collects a property tax for you, they get 71 cents. That includes online and mail-ins. I have a little bit of issue with that, but we're still having that conversation around that. I don't think it costs 71 cents for someone to go on a computer, swipe your card, and be done with it. I think that's a little high, but we're still having that discussion. The limited plate is $1.27. That didn't change. So for the upcoming year, the cost will be $1.06 and $1.27 and 71 cents. Now, there's one other thing here that happened with this. The local plate agency were also able to lobby and say, for the first 6 months, it was $1.06 and then went to 71 cents. We think it should have been $1.07 the whole time. So what the bill says, basically, without reading all this to you, is that for those months where it was 71 cents and went to the LPA, DMV's got to calculate what it would have been if it had been $1.06, and then send that to the LPA and take that out of local monies over a three-month period. Okay, so not only did they get $1.06, they got it retroactively for those months where it had gone down to 71. And that's really all this says here without, I don't necessarily want to read it to you. Any questions on that? Okay. Now, just look at that, the overall cost. What does it cost to actually put a bill on the street and collect it? Okay. The first thing that's involved in that is overhead fee. For every notice that goes out, there's a $1.21 charge for that. That includes everything. That includes printing it, mailing it. It includes the valuation service that counties pay for, which they were paying for before. Most of these costs the counties were already paying, and they're still paying. Okay. Software license and maintenance, personnel costs. We have a couple of positions that are paid for through this. DMV has some, DOT Fiscal has some. Those positions were needed solely because of this tag and tax. Okay. So all those costs are in that $1.21. And that's what we estimated it to be early on, and it's pretty much been there. I got a meeting on Monday to go over that one more time. We're supposed to review that about every 6 months and see if $1.21 is enough. Is it too much? The last time we looked at it, it was pretty constant. So $1.21 for the overhead. Then these other fees come into play depending on who collects it and how it is collected. Okay? So you take $1.21, and if that tax is collected by an LPA, you can add $1.06 to it. If it's collected by DMV, online, mail-in, or one of their state-run offices, you can add 71 cents to it. If it's a limited plate, first-time issuance, you can take $1.21, $1.06, and $1.27. Those are expensive. That's one reason why we just soon not have that in the system, but it's there. And trust me, there's no way of getting rid of that as far as the car dealers are concerned. Credit card fees, debit card fees are variable, obviously, depending on, so the main thing with credit card fees and debit card fees is that each party involved in the transaction, whether it be DMV, the county, the city, pays their proportionate share of the credit card fee. Now, we'd like to see more and more people use debit cards. Debit cards are far more cheaper than credit cards are. Now, DMV had a problem getting the debit card system working, but it is working now. So I think some of those fees will go down now that they got a debit card working. There are some other costs involved here, and most of it goes back to that limited plate. Limited plate, there's an extra mailing that has to take place there, so it's 50 cents for that. Common payment service, that's part of your credit card fee, so anytime credit card or debit card is used, that 23 cents gets charged as well. So worst case scenario here is someone buys a new car, the LPA collects it, they get a limited plate, and you get all those charges. Then they pay with a credit card. That's the worst case scenario. Okay. Most of the people, all they're doing is renewing a tag. You know, and I think our goal in government is to try to push people toward using it online because that's simple. Okay. Some of the collection fees for that is less. You do have the credit card fee involved in those. Any questions on those costs? Now we'll go over more generally what is it costing overall, looking at overall collections, overall expenses here in a few minutes. There was a big concern when we first went live that there were going to be a lot of people not renewing their tax because they didn't have the money to pay their tax. Okay. And what you see here is the blue line is 2012, the red line is 2013, and there are more people renewing late and later than in the old system. Okay. And as you can see, those lines are getting closer together as we go. And I believe if we looked at the data past March, they probably have crossed or are touching now. Okay. But I wasn't concerned early on because we saw that. Now, some of those people that were renewing late and later were those that had to pay twice. The people who didn't pay their taxes on time are the same people who renew late. They're the same people right around expired tags. The same people get tickets for doing so. They don't come in and try to straighten it all out. You know, so that's just human nature. Okay. So if someone asks me or people, did this new system cause people to renew late, more people to renew late? I'd have to say yes, small percentage. Are they renewing later? Yes. They may go a month or two extra. You know, if mine expires and I ride down the street and back, I get a ticket. But some of these people ride around for 2 or 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, and don't get one. Okay. And one time I did that, I got a ticket. So I make sure I don't do that. I'm just not lucky. This is just another comparison of that. Had a huge spike when the system first went live, because all of a sudden I think people weren't sure what was going on, and these people had to pay twice. There was a bunch of those in there, and it looked like at that time DMV was concerned, we were concerned that hey, maybe this is backfiring on us. But what you see here is it's coming back down, and it's leveling back off. Okay. Unpaid LRPs, what you'll see here is over time, those do get paid. There's still going to be those people on those limited plates that have 60 days to pay who are going to pay late. There's no question about that. Okay. Keep in mind, anytime someone pays late or renews late, you get 5% interest on it. DMV gets 5% interest on the $28, which is something they've never gotten before. Because the fact that more people are renewing late actually generates additional revenue. That's not the way we like to generate revenue, but that's just a fact. So we're not concerned about the late renewals as much as we were at one time. And I know the state auditor's office looked at that, and I think they're satisfied that, you know, that's not going to be a problem as we move forward. Let's look at actual revenues collected. This is the real numbers out of the VTS system. One good thing about the VTS system is that we can see everything. Tina can go into any county she wants to. She can see exactly what's going on. She can go online. She can help them. We can see where they're making mistakes. We can see what the numbers really are. So that's the one good thing about the VTS is, from the state's perspective, we can see everything. It's just a system that we have access to. What you'll see here is, and this is what I predicted would happen, and had to try to calm some folks down when we first went live, because that first month it was only 22 million. Okay, I mean, this is kind of like a pump you had to prime. You had to get this thing started. One thing a lot of people forgot about September was September tags expired in September, right? But you got a 15-day grace period, right? Most people didn't renew until that grace period, which means those numbers actually showed up in October's numbers. Okay. And those late renewals had to start coming in. So what you'll see is it went from 22 million, and now it's somewhere around 65 million every month. I believe you sent me June the other day after I did this, and it was somewhere around 64, 65 as well. So we got 4 months in a row here, which has been somewhere around 65 million. And that may be a little high because DMV will tell you that March, April, May, and June are their busiest months. It goes down a little bit in the wintertime. That's just, for whatever reason, that's just history. But I do believe overall it will somewhere be between 55 and 65 on average going forward every month. Because there's always those people renewing late. That's not going to change. This is the net revenues. Again, we can see exactly what the numbers are. Let's talk about comparing it to the old system and the new system. Did we accomplish what we wanted to in getting more revenue to local governments within the 12-month fiscal year? That's the goal. Okay, we had predicted there was about $80 million at the end of each fiscal year that was not collected. So it had to be collected later. Using the data from the Treasurer's website, in 2012-13, there was $570 million that was collected during that fiscal year on motor vehicles in North Carolina, which averaged out to be about $47 million a month. In the new system, using the numbers that are there now, it averages $55 million. That's $671 million. That's a difference of $100 million. I think we solved the problem where the $80 million was missing. That was the goal here. There should be more money coming into the local governments during the 12-month fiscal year. Now, that's not to say that some of that $100 million was not collected at some point. It might have been collected 12 months later, and after all kinds of collection revenues. Here you get it up front. Now, as far as expenses go, this is your gross revenues, this is your net revenues. $13.6 million in expenses so far, and that's everything. That's credit cards, that's overhead costs, that's collection fees, that's all of it is in that number of expenses. Works out to be about 3%. It's costing you about 3% to collect your motor vehicle taxes based on these numbers. These are just raw numbers. Might be more or less for your county depending on if more people do it online or more people using credit cards. You know, so your number may be a little different if you go do this same calculation. And that's just looking at September to May. And keep in mind, September is probably a little low, obviously, because of that 20-something million. So we just use the raw numbers here. And for this first fiscal year that we're involved in, there was actually, I won't call it a windfall, there was actually additional money collected that year. There were 16 months in a 12-month period. Because you had 6 months off the old system and 10 months off the new. Overall, that was $845 million. where in the past it's been about 570 million. So the local government's actually got it's a one-time thing, so don't budget using this. This is a budget, folks, so make sure you don't look at what you actually got last year off both systems and use that, because you're going to overestimate what your revenues are. But it was actually a good thing. Okay? 'Cause one of the finance officers, and the last time I spoke on this, stood up and said, you know, we've already got as much money already that we got all last year. I said, that's correct, because of this. Don't count on that again. Okay? That's a one-time bonus of the system. Because really, if you think about it, what we did, we took the due date and we moved it up 4 months. I had to write a letter yesterday to the taxpayer because they called the member of the General Assembly saying, well, I've paid twice in the same year. Well, they did pay twice in the same calendar year, but they didn't pay twice in the same tax year. But we did the amount of time between due dates for this first year went from 12 months to 8 months. There's no way of doing this without doing that. Okay? Citizens haven't necessarily like that. Now, just look at expenses on a transaction basis. There's been a lot of discussion about this, whether or not it's costing less or more. We did a survey back in 2012 to try to get our hands around what does it cost the county to put a bill on the street and collect it today. And that came out to be $2.65 based on the survey we did of the counties. And our survey was a spreadsheet that asked specific questions to try to get the real numbers. Because when you start talking about cost of doing this, you got to include maintenance, license, software license, personnel, mailing, postage, everything. But that's what you're paying for in the new system. Now, most counties charge the municipalities for collecting, and it said you could charge up to 1.5%. I just used 1% in here, which is $1. Now, some counties didn't charge it that much, some charge more. But if it's $1 and you add that to the $2.65, cost of local governments to collect that bill in the old system was somewhere around $3, $3.65 per transaction. In the new system, this is using raw data out of the system, it's $2.62. And that's split between the units. 30% of the levy in North Carolina is in more than one jurisdiction, which means it has to be split between them. So if you take that, just that 30% of that's $1.84. That's the county share. This would be the other share of whoever else that vehicle is located in, typically a municipality or a fire district. So I think here what we're trying to show is that it did save money from a transaction standpoint. And you can go back, most of this stuff I've done here, you can go back and use your exact county data and you can figure out. Now, we have counties in the state that have no municipalities. Not many, but we have a few. They've got to pay the $2.62. They don't share with anybody. Okay, Durham County, for example, a large portion of Durham County, Durham County is in Durham City, right? So they're splitting theirs 50-50 probably. So I think Durham County, if you've talked to them, their cost of doing business is going way down. They were paying like $4 to collect theirs, and now they're paying half of the $2.62. Depending on the county, this varies a little bit, depending on your municipality. If you're a city or town, it really depends on how much the county was charging you. Were they charging you 1.5%? Were they charging you 1%? Were they charging you some nominal fee? In Wake County charged their municipalities very little to collect property tax. So those municipalities saw an increase in their costs because they're splitting it now, proportionally. Tax collection percentages, again, we looked a while ago, old system is somewhere around 86%. What I did here is 80% of the transactions are renewals and about 20% are new vehicles. You get 100% of the 80% is done every time. All your renewals you get up front. They don't pay the tax, they don't get a tax. But because of limited plate, there's a 2-month lag there. Okay? And I was very conservative using 85%. I've looked at it since then, and it's quite a bit higher than that. which would drive that percentage there up. But overall, if you use this conservative approach, the overall state collection rate on motor vehicles went from 86 to 97. But I believe this is probably closer to 99, because I believe my 85% collection rate is probably closer to 95. Okay. Now that I've looked at the numbers a little bit since I put this together. But either way, we've increased it that 10 or 11% that we wanted to. I think I'm about out of time, so I'm going to stop before I go through this and see if anybody has any questions. One thing we'd like to get back from this group, and of course the finance officers, is we have a lot of reports, and hopefully you've got my presentation online. You look at these reports. The counties have control of the reports. They can allow the cities to have access to those reports, and we encourage them to do so. That way cities can look at those as well. But all these reports allow the finance folks and those folks to distribute this money back, decide how much cost comes from each jurisdiction. And some of these reports should help you as budget folks to try to determine, because one thing that's definitely difficult this first year is trying to plan ahead from a budget perspective. Because you've got a lot of variables here as we've just gone over. You can't, can I trust last year's number? Well, you can't necessarily trust last year's number if you got that windfall in there. How do I do this? I think looking at this from a simple perspective, you can figure out how much revenue is coming in each month by just looking at your history over the last, throw September out, because that's not going to happen again. You can figure out basically how much revenue is coming in on a monthly basis in your county, and you can project that going forward. You know how much expenses you are based on these reports. You can get the difference. Now, revenue is what you can expect to come in through your door. Remember, these expenses were taken out front. Okay, so you get a report that shows gross, you get a report that shows the expenses, you get a report that shows the net. Okay, and the net, to me, is what you should be looking at budgeting. Because that's going to be pretty constant. Once this thing gets going, I think it's going pretty good. I don't see that changing a whole lot. So if you look at those reports, you can determine based on what you're getting on a monthly basis. At this point, that's pretty much what you're going to get going forward. Especially if you throw September out, take October to the day, you're going to be probably conservative. That's going to be somewhere around 55, 56 million. In reality, it may be somewhere around 65 million statewide. That changes for each jurisdiction, so I encourage you to look at what yours actually is. Okay. Any questions on any reports y'all see or any issues? Tina, I'd love Tina to answer that.
Yeah, you have to go through the county. The county you have to have an NCID and then talk with the county BTS administrator or the taxes administrator and give them your NCID and ask them to add you to the system. And they can just give you the reports option.
We've had challenges that said, no, you have to ask us for the reports. The county attorney said, no.
Which county?
Cumberland.
Yeah, we've had that conversation. Yeah, I don't know that we agree with their county attorney in that particular situation. So we'll be glad to discuss that further with Cumberland County and see. I know Tina's worked with them a little bit on that. Most counties have given their municipalities the ability to go in there, because they can block you out of everything else. Now, one thing we've talked about doing is maybe doing a different report that takes out some of the information that the county attorney was concerned about. So that's something I guess we can talk about some more. We'll take that back and take a look at it. Any other questions anybody's got? So I either did a really good job, y'all already knew all this before I got here today. So I'm very pleased with the system overall. We're still working on some bugs. What we'd like to hear back from this group, of course, is as you work with those reports, because I don't use reports, Tina doesn't use reports. We try to get feedback early on to design those reports, but there probably need to be tweaked here and there. So if there's something that you're not getting that you think you need, then bring it to us. We'll take it to the users group, and if the user group as a whole agrees that, yeah, that's something that all counties or cities or whoever could utilize, then we will try to do that. We do have the capability of writing new reports or changing reports. And so if there's something there you're not getting, please let us know what that is, and we'll try to do it. We'll try to get it for you. Ken, you got anything? I got a question right here. Go ahead.
I was gonna know, we have recently added several reports. One of the issues with the budget process was the reports could only be run by the renewal month. And so a lot of requests was for to also be able to run it by transaction date. So if you haven't been in the BTS recently and run any reports, there are new reports where you can actually run by transaction date, which puts the amount of revenue closer in line to what they were expecting. If you run it by renewal month, that can kind of be, if people renew late, that can kind of throw that off. So we have updated the reports based on that feedback from the budget officer.
Yeah, we're trying to listen to the needs of local government. Like I said, we're managing this thing, but we don't use it other than help you collect your taxes and budget and that kind of thing. Got a question here?
It's more a finance question than a budget question. We're having a really hard time with our levy each month, taking the value on the reports, times our tax rate, getting the tax dollars on the report. And I don't know if we don't get the right reports from the county, but it's not, we're not balancing it every month, and it's throwing off our levy.
You should always balance by you need 3 reports to balance. That's the reconciliation report, the net distribution report, and the finance report. And those reports only balance with your distribution is a very small window of time. So if you get your distribution on the 10th of the month, but you don't run the report for another week, you're not going to balance. You're going to be off by a little bit, and that's because of what David talked about, all the different scenarios with DMV where somebody could go back in, they could do a reversal, but that would show up on your next month's report. So if you coincide running that report, those 3
We
reports.
can't run the reports, it's the
What
county that
county
runs the
are you
reports
That's
there.
kind of what I get.
So we're subject
with
to
Dare?
there, so
Dare,
it's
okay.
whatever they run the
But
reports.
now, I've been in, I'm actually going to Dare County, next month. Greta's asked me to come down, because they've taken over and so we're actually
We're the only municipality that they don't collect themselves, so they don't know what reports we
So-
need, and we don't know what to ask
Right.
for.
So that's one of the things we're working with them on is, and I'll speak to her. So she's been very active in trying to.
It's not that they
figure out
won't give us what we
Right.
ask for, I just don't know what to ask for.
That's correct, and she's kind of in that, so we'll help with that.
Okay.
That's-
We got the red light to stop, so we'll stop. Tina and I will hang around. If you got any questions, just, come to us, and we'll try to answer some of these individually. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Thank y'all very much. If you need us, give us a call. We'll try to help you where we can. Thank you.